Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 16 of I Eat, I Read, I Watch. This is a series highlighting my solo dinners and my reading or Netflix accompaniments. Please treat yourself well at mealtimes too. Don't just eat alone, dine solo. You're worth it, and it's not hard to do. If you've missed earlier installments, be sure to check them out on my website. So today the meal is salmon cakes and ragu. You might recall last time it was salmon mac and cheese. Well, some of the so-called smoked salmon was still resting in my fridge, awaiting contamination, along with a bunch of veg ready to go off. So I needed to be creative. So let's go. First, I diced an onion with some olive oil, heated to medium, number 6 on the dial. Then some diced cremini mushrooms, a yellow pepper, half a zook, and a Chinese eggplant. As the onions got soft, I threw in half a head of sliced garlic cloves, then all the chopped veg, and finally a couple of sprigs of rosemary, some dried basil from the plant that died on my window ledge, some umami salt, all the grape tomatoes in the bowl on the counter, and reduced it to number 4 on the dial. I'll check in a few to see whether I need to add some tomato paste or passato, depending on the thickness. Salmon cakes, think crab but without crab, need breadcrumbs for binding, and my last trip to the supermarket yielded nothing Canadian made in the breadcrumb area. This label checking is a new thing for me, but if we're subject to tariffs or other economic southern pressures, we need to start new habits. Without the canned breadcrumbs, this meal started with making some from a couple of slices of sourdough bread from my freezer. My Braun immersion blender came with a blender-type attachment. A few minutes later, voila, breadcrumbs. I scraped the salmon flesh from its remarkably thick skin and realized there wasn't enough of it, nor it was the right consistency to make good salmon cakes. I opened a tin of canned and mixed all the salmon together with 2 raw eggs and a bunch of chopped scallions. Need something for zing, I thought, so I added a couple of spoonsful of feta chunks, and then a few spoons of crumbs. Mix, mix, mix. Still a bit wet, so I got a bowl of cornmeal for dredging. I got a hunk of butter heating in my precious cast iron pan, then formed a patty, ran through the cornmeal, and gently lowered it into the butter. It gave me that satisfying sizzle, promising just a little crust on the cake, as I'd hoped. I lifted the lid on the ragu, which was coming along nicely. I gave it a good stir and decided it'd be better a little thicker, but that would happen with the lid off. No need for paste this time. My first tester cake had been languishing in the pan for a few minutes. Best check to see if it's holding together. I tentatively lifted a corner. Perfect. I flipped it over and saw that telltale browning that confirmed my strong suspicion that this was going to work. Once I estimated the second side was done, I plated it, added another chunk of butter, and nestled the remaining flour in the pan. The remaining 4 cakes in the pan. Not quite the sizzle of the first one, but a reasonably satisfying sound nonetheless. With a little more testing and turning and some ragu stirring, I had 5 cooked cakes and a decent veg mélange to go aside it. I'm keen for a cold component on each plate, so I extracted my trusty jar of Polish marinated mushrooms with carrots and the caper jar. Obviously, fish cries for capers. With a glass of ginger kombucha, what an excellent repast. Prep time, about 30 minutes. Cost, the salmon was about $7 originally, another, let's say, $5 for the veg, and I got 2 meals out of it. What's your favorite go-to for cleaning up the fridge? Put it in the comments on my website, please. So what am I reading? Well, I recently discovered Jane Friedman. She has spent 25 years working in the publishing industry with a focus on business reporting and author education. I ordered her book, The Business of Being a Writer, from the library as part of my effort to reduce the books in my house. I also know myself. I buy these books on writing and read the first few pages and then get bored. If nothing else, they drive me back to the actual writing. I suppose that's as good an outcome as any. Friedman, though, has broken the mold. Not only am I going to read The Business of Being a Writer to the end, I'm going to pre-order the second edition to be released later this spring. Why is this so good? Well, Friedman tells it like it is. If you want to make it, even in a small way, as a writer, you have to work hard, not just creatively, but on the business side too. That means doing many of the things I've picked up along the way from other courses, like submitting regularly to publications, expecting to be declined in the vast majority of cases, building a following person by person, getting involved in the writerly community, reading a lot, and writing a lot. She's giving me lots of good info on how to get a book published, though, and that's all new to me. If you're a writer and you haven't read this one, I highly recommend it. If you've got a reading recommendation about writing, please add it to the comments on my website. And finally, something I've found on YouTube. This is someone I've discovered named Eleanor Mills. Mills is a UK-based reporter turned businesswoman who's created a movement of midlife women called Noon. I knew of her book, released already in the UK and coming very soon to Canada, called Much More to Come. I've also been subscribing to her newsletter for a few months. But it was the interview she did with Davina McCall, a well-known TV personality in the UK, that really hooked me on Mills. Mills talked about how she ended up having to reinvent herself when she was dumped from her journalism career at about age 50. She considered how, if we are all likely to live until our 90s, 50 is only noontime of our life. Hence the term noon for her movement. She's also coined this term queenager, summing up the feelings of being at the top of your game and young enough to really run with it. Both Mills and McCall are women I'd really want to hang out with. Her message so resonated with me, I've pre-ordered her book. I know many of you will find hers a refreshing voice too. If you go to my website and see this blog, you can find the links to the 2 pieces that I've seen about her. If you've got anything worth sharing from YouTube, then make sure you add it to the comments on my website. Thanks for watching.